right, cool. All right.
Move to your left a little bit.
Your black presence is necessary from big mama to auntie Obama is first lady. I validated. I still remember my mother's gumbo. Saturday mornings waking to soulful sounds of gospel. The richness of ancestral legacies and culture, our history extends beyond American borders. So please believe the hype. You're not too much. You are enough. Never shrink back. Always speak up.
Welcome to the Leading Executive, the preferred leadership development, leadership training, and soft skills learning management platform for various organizations. At the Leading Executive, we believe in elevating your leader's skills with experiential learning. Our platform offers a wide range of leadership training and soft skills courses that are designed to help your leaders unlock their full potential. Whether you're an individual looking to enhance your leadership skills or an organization looking to develop your team, the Leading Executive has got you covered. Our courses are designed to be engaging, interactive, and practical, ensuring that your leaders not only learn the skills, but also apply them in real-life situations. Our motto is unlock your leader's full potential. We believe that every leader has the potential to be great, and our platform is designed to help them get there. So what are you waiting for? Sign up today and start unlocking your leader's full potential with the Leading Executive. The Leading Executive, elevate your leader's skills with experiential learning.
Let them dream big, adding flavor, keep it seasoned, give them reasons to believe in what our ancestors dreamed of. You are beautifully valuable, distinguishably royal. Next time you look in the mirror, pause and say, black girl, I love you. I love you.
Good evening, and welcome back to the part two of the Energizer Reproductive Health for Black Women Fireside Chat. I am your host, Tamika Chapman, and I am joined tonight by some amazing, two more of my favorite people, okay? We have Gerard Ware, and we also have Sunita. I'm sorry, I'm about to mess it all up here. I'm so doggone excited. Sunita Mitchell. I've been about Sunita Smith. Where that's at, okay? But anywho, so reproductive health for Black Women Fireside Chat. If you all tuned in last week, you heard a little bit about my journey in reproductive health, being diagnosed with PCOS at the young age of 21, but dealing with all of the signs and symptoms in my early teens and didn't even know it. And then at the age of 21, still battling because the doctors still really weren't well versed in what PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, was. I'm grateful that we now have better care, that there's more support, there's more conversations about it. And so again, I wanted to make sure that I use my platform to do something impactful, to talk about impactful conversations, right? To having impactful conversations with those who, one, either are experts, have experienced it, or are supporters and advocates for it. And so September is also the awareness month for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And by all means, I should be doing something, right? Not just all year, but especially in the month of September, talking about it. So the Reproductive Health for Black Women Fireside Chat came about because I wanted to bring more light to the health challenges that we as women face, but not just we as women. We also have our men, we have our male counterparts that's impacted one way or the other, as we all are going on this path. And so tonight is no different. So first, I just want to say thank you all. Welcome. And thank you all for joining us tonight. But first, I want to make sure that you share this broadcast out with others, allow them to join the conversation, be a part of the conversation, engage with us. I'm sure there's going to be something that's going to resonate with someone that you know. And we just ask that you share the broadcast here. So we're just going to jump right into conversation with Gerard Ware, right? I want to jump into conversation about men's emotional intelligence, right? But before we do that, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your journey when it comes to the reproductive health and challenges that we as women face, what has been your experience with that?
First, welcome, audience. Thank you both ladies for joining me. Tamika, I was a little antsy over here. I'm so used to running the show. This is one of the few times I've been in the guest seat. So I was like, ooh, let me talk, let me talk. So get myself under control over here. So, but yeah, it's a very, very important topic. Like you said, usually this is seen through the lenses of a woman, or how can the community, the family, the mate support the woman. But you brought up an interesting and important part of it is how do men fit in, and not only their personal issues, but also to make sure that you're supportive to your mate, to our female counterparts, which is important. Again, it's understandable why the focus is usually on the woman, but just understanding, through what you're talking about, emotional intelligence and wellness, making sure that we men are more vocal and showing up and expressing how we feel and seeking that same care that we're making sure that our female counterparts are seeking. So a little about me, this is story be a little unpolished. I'll be honest, I haven't talked to a lot of people about it. So thank you for the opportunity to share, Tamika. But yeah, I was married, and my ex-wife was pregnant with twins. One of the happiest moments of my life. I do remember that about it. Again, she is an ex-wife, so that's another troubling part of it, is that the marriage also didn't make it. I feel like that could have put some strain on it as well. But yeah, just I remember some of the complications that she was having, and how it's just a plethora of emotions, up and downs, happy, worry, the type of thing, leaning on your faith, not worrying on the outside, but carrying it on the inside. So you went through all that stuff, and then I just remember that phone call where she told me that she had lost them, and it was one of the hardest, most troubling times of my life. And again, I hadn't really been able to tell it at this, level of detail, but I do remember just a great level, tremendous level of sadness, failure on my end, feeling like, what could I have done? You know, was I stressing her too much? Could I control her diet? You know, could I have done other things to, increase her comfort level? That type of thing was my own health, a contributing factor to it. So it was all that right there. And to be honest, I never dug into, you know, the whys or how it could have. It was just one of those things, like, it was just easier to suppress it, but at the same time try to be there for her as much as possible. So it's kind of what I remember about it. It was a few years
Yeah.
ago, about 10 years ago, and it's still, troubling and challenging to even think about it. But again, we go through it, and these shows like this are important to have, so it does give men an opportunity to share and encourage other men to seek help, open up and share their feelings as well.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know that a lot of times when we're talking about something so sensitive, as this topic, it's hard. It's hard to open up and share. But I appreciate you opening up, and I appreciate you sharing. I will ask you, during the times, during that time in your life, did you properly grieve, or did you understand what grief was at that time, or did you recognize that you were in a grieving moment and gave yourself time to, to address it?
Yeah, good question. I absolutely knew what grieving was. Just suffering and dealing with death. The loss of loved ones. That time I was still in the military, and I
Mm.
hadn't been back, I think, from Afghanistan a few years. So, dealing with death of service members, it teaches you how to suppress your
Mm.
emotions out of necessity, you know.
Yeah.
So it's one of those skills, for lack of a better way to describe it, that I carried. So yeah, I did. I suppressed it. I know I didn't properly grieve, but now, I'll be honest, I didn't even want to. I didn't want
Right.
to feel it. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to talk about it. It was one of those things, again, I wanted to suppress and move behind me as quickly as possible.
Right. You know, you talking my language right now, Gerard. Okay, and I think Sunita can vouch for vouch for me on that one. You know, and not wanting to talk about it and suppressing it and putting a nice little box with a bow on it and putting it in the back of your
Yeah.
mind. Because I for me, it's like facing those emotions is going to be hard. I
Mhm.
don't know if I'm ready to really start crying right now, right?
Right.
So it's just
Right.
like if I unpack this, how am I going to be able to stand, continue to stand, and continue to go, and so
Right.
for me, instead of unpacking it and dealing with it, I was just like, yeah, I'm just leave it alone. I'm
Oh
gonna leave on good feelings alone.
yeah.
But this is where I want to bring Sunita into talking about, you know, addressing and how do we first begin to address that we're in a grieving moment. What does that look like? Are there some signs and symptoms that maybe we can notice, right? Maybe some signs and symptoms that'll show up that'll alert us that, hey, there may be, some grief that we need to deal with.
Right. And so thank you tonight for, you know, having me on tonight. And so, yeah, sometimes we can overlook some things because, as Gerard mentioned, a lot of times men are overlooked when it comes to grief and their part in the reproductive health and when it comes to infant loss or pregnancy loss. And so, it's always easier to identify in women because we will either turn into ourselves or we'll those we'll go shopping, we'll do things that may be more clear to other people that something's off about that particular woman. But when it comes to men, a lot of times we don't focused on the impact of loss or infertility and things like that. So I think that your question was, how do we identify with men, identifying what, because a lot of times men, it is our culture, it's cultural, right? It's the culture that says, well, men, you need to get on with the get on, right? You need to get on back in the game, and your focus should be on your wife or significant other, right? Like you don't have time to grieve. So I think that the way we do that is we pause and we really have a dialogue with the men in our lives and say, whoa, this was a significant impact. You are okay with, somebody said, yeah, it's okay to suppress. Yes, sometimes, but sometimes, Sheila says, sometimes it helps you deal with losses by suppressing your emotions to an extent, right? Because are we suppressing our emotions or are we just not trying to deal with it? Right. So that's where like the suppression of emotions is, are we just trying not to deal with it? Or are we afraid of confronting the emotions that we feel? And what happens with suppression is just like that bottle of soda, when you drop it and you try to take the top off, it explodes. And it explodes at a random time, right? Just when you're ready, you got your cup of ice and you're ready for your soda, and your soda explodes, right? Like, so with men, getting back to the men, it's important to engage, right? By asking the question, even if your significant other is someone who will retreat into themselves, it's just like, hey, I'm just doing a quick check-in. Ladies, we can't talk him to death. You really just have to say, I'm doing a quick check-in. I just want to know, how are you doing? In fact, I just did this yesterday with my husband, who was remembering his grandmother's birthday yesterday. I didn't have no long conversation with him, but I can pick up on that there was something wrong. Now, should I just walk by and act like I don't notice? Right? If I was to bring him in here, he probably would say, thank you for at least asking. I think, I'm not a man, but I think they do feel like just asking them the question, how do you feel today, opens them up to share what they want to share and allow them to share to the extent that they want to share without forcing them to go into long dialogue.
Right.
So I think those are just some of the things. It's just like really just a short, hey, I'm just checking in. How are you today? I know what today is. I know what is the significance of it. So how are you?
Right. Right.
Good. Okay. And that's that. Yep.
And as you said, that a lot of times we overlook the men. We don't really consider their feelings and their emotions because we're so wrapped up in, oh my gosh, I want to have this baby. I want to start our family. I want us to, have this beautiful family that we've always dreamed about and talked about. But Gerard, I'd ask you a question. As you were not dealing with your grief, right? As you were not dealing with it. How did you show up for your wife at that time? Like, what did that look like for you, and how you showed up? I know you questioned, did you do enough, or were you supportive enough, or did you not do, one thing that you should have done? And think we all do that, but how did you still show up for your wife during that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I just remember, as I told y'all earlier, we were going through marital issues at the time anyway. And it was just trying to be that voice of reason, just stand up, be strong, again, my years in the military too. That's me as Sergeant Ware at the time, having to lead soldiers, and having to work, still your son, to your parents, and a brother, to your siblings, and uncle to your nieces. So you're all these other things at the same time. And but same time trying to make sure you're there. I'm there for my wife. So it was hard. I tell you, it was no science. I remember we went through some counseling sessions, and even that was added stress. With it made it even more difficult. Grieving. I always tell people it's such a personal um, exercise, if you will. It's so personal. Like you have to be careful. You can't go beyond the speed that the person who's grieving is ready to go. And what works Monday might not work Monday night, or even Tuesday. So it takes a level of grace that most people don't even know exists or don't know is possible. And for me, again, it was just showing up, trying to be there for her, suppressing how I felt, accepting blame when I know it wasn't my fault at some things. It was just like, man, let me be what she's needing just to, get through the moment. So, it was just really just what's that old saying, throwing things at the wall and hoping some stick.
Right.
It's kind of how I was conducting myself at that time.
Right. So if there's other men who, maybe right now going through it, because, reproductive health is not just a one time a year type of thing. It's not just happening in 1 month, right? It's all year long. Women can be facing some issues all year long. I know for me, it was 18 years of 12 months, right? And
Wow.
so with that, as the man, you spoke of, could you have done, you questioned yourself, and maybe feeling helpless at that time. What advice can you give to another man, like right now, if he's feeling helpless? What advice can you give to him to help him, stand back up in who he is,
Yeah.
not saying put you to the side,
Yeah.
I ain't gonna say put you to the side, but what can you say to that?
It's a number of things I would recommend. One is it's your faith. I tell people all the time, if you don't have faith, you're gonna panic. Because you're gonna be looking at what you're facing, and when it's not working, you lose hope, right? And especially if the person that you're interacting with is dealing with it too. So number one, again, is having faith. Two is try to maintain some sense of normalcy in your life. Get some routine, some things that you can control, get those things under control. And some of the things that we kind of overlook and don't and can take for granted is building some normalcy and some routines in your sleep patterns, eating right, a prayer life. You got to be so intentional too with man, there's so many resources out there for us, expert counselors and life coaches and pastors, and we do ourselves a disservice when we don't tap into those resources, people that are ready to help us. And then even more important is just surrounding yourself around people who know who know you, people who mean you well, and can kind of pick up on your behaviors and your mood swings and just be there for you. Because sometimes you don't got the words, right? But if you got those people around you that are in tune, that are paying attention, that are watching you and being there for you, I mean, it can do wonders. And I remember Dr. Troy was on a show with him a few weeks ago, and he talked about just doing the work. And if you do the work over time, the results are going to show. Put in the work, you got to be so intentional with it. When I'm talking about the work, the reading, the self-help, the professional help, your health, your sleep patterns, your eating better, all those things right there. And it makes a difference. And then give yourself time. Give yourself time, because there is no one right way to do it that's going to get you there at the right time. It's an ongoing grieving process that, again, you could be good at one moment and the next moment you're not. But give yourself that grace and that time to let it happen naturally.
Right. I love that. I love all of that. Especially that give yourself time. I say give yourself grace. Right. I love it. I love it. And so, here's one last question I will ask of you, because we're getting ready to hop into some more conversations strictly about this. But you were going through marriage counseling. Did you say that you went through counseling for the grief as well, or not?
It wasn't necessarily for the grief. It was just for the our own just dysfunction in the marriage.
Okay. So with that, how did you learn to balance the grief that you had and still just shake it off and show up? Because, sometimes even with that military background, you can still, those feelings and those emotions can overtake our standing and the strength that we have. But how did you learn to balance it and still be able to show up and not, spaz out at work? Okay.
And let me tell you,
words.
in the simplest way to put it, I didn't learn it. It was day to day, moment to moment, really. And it's one of those things, like, you just, what we said earlier, you suppress what you're going through, you hold it, and then when you're by yourself, man, it comes out, and it just gets you to the next moment. So I never, at that point, I didn't learn to balance anything. It was just like grace, people around you, keeping myself busy helped. But yeah, I just remember those nights when it was just me, like, man. Hey, y'all know that old that picture, if you grew up in a Christian household, where it had you the footsteps. It had the person walking, then had the footsteps. And it was like, Jesus was walking with you. Later on, you realize it was nothing but the grace of God that carried me. But yeah, at the moment, I had nothing. Literally, I had nothing. And that's just me being transparent with the situation. I had nothing.
Well, listen, you speaking to the power of faith, okay? The power of grace. Because when you have nothing, that's all you have. I mean, that's what you activate. You stand and you move on with it, right? You keep moving forward. You keep moving forward. Now, Sunita, I know Sunita's she's not going to agree to any of that, okay? She is not going to agree to any of that. Because again, she is a grief recovery specialist, and she helps men and women learn how to acknowledge, address, deal, and heal with grief, right? So running from it is kind of my specialty, okay? But it's not the thing that you should do. But Sunita, I want to talk to you about grief recovery and healing after loss, and what does that look like? A lot of times we are not ready to really move forward because we want to remember, and sometimes we may feel guilty about moving forward and living a life, right? But how do we find that balance? How do we begin to be okay with not necessarily the challenge, but the loss, and then still move forward? What does that look like, and how do we do it?
So you said a lot of things, Gerard. that was good. And actually, so not only am I a grief recovery specialist, but I'm also in school, my second, really almost done with the program for my mental health, clinical mental health. So I have a even deeper thought on on this, as well with a hint of the pastoral care, so the spiritual side as well. But one of the things that in the grief recovery is a lot of the things were myths. Like we call it, like if we just give it time, it's all gonna be all right. It's really not. Like you got to do something with the time, because if time does nothing but go by, right? So if you aren't doing anything to heal with the time, it's what you're doing with the time. So some of the things I would tag in with Gerard is saying, like he mentioned some things like going to counseling, going to a professional counselor, because you do want to make sure that you're getting those things and being able to identify, am I going into depression, a severity of depression, a working depression? Where are you? Because that's different. You have to be able to manage those things, right? Prayer, I love it. I love prayer, and I know God is able, but God has also given you the ability to go and see somebody to help you through, right? Because yes, we can pray, and we know, trust me, I am all for a good deliverance service, right? And I'm for the intercessory prayer. I'm for all of that. Trust me and believe. But you also faith without works. Let's underline that. There is some work that you have to do in order to become healed, right? It's just not going to, we all know Jesus has the ability to speak a word, and God has the ability to speak something. But then today we need to do some work to get through it. So I do like that emphasis with the time, doing the work. That is important. You have to do the work. And statistically, something else Gerard mentioned was, if your marriage was already that's statistically, like what he said was statistical, right? That if a couple is already struggling and then you tackle on something extreme such as a loss, that's only going to keep going. And so it makes it harder, because marital counseling and grief counseling is different. You're dealing with two different elephants, totally. Right? So you have to confront both elephants, because one of them you're going to be doing together. And like I tell with the couples is, you may do marital counseling, but then you need to do individual counseling, because there are things that you want to say that you can't necessarily say to your spouse, but you need a space, right? You need a space where you can just be you, right? And so let me get back to your question, because I was just writing down those things that Gerard had said. And one of the things he mentioned also was the power of presence. You don't always have to talk. The person who is grieving, just for all the listeners, they don't know. Let me just be honest. They don't know what they need. So stop asking them. Okay, they don't know what they need. So if you think it's a need, do it. If you think you want to give them something to eat, get them something to eat. If you think you them a card, get them a card. Because if you ask them, I can tell you 98.99%, they're going to tell you they're fine. I'm good. I don't need nothing. They don't know what they need, because they're so engulfed in grief and the day-to-day decisions of funeral planning and just trying to get back to a normal life, or get back to life. They don't know what they need. So stop asking them, because they don't know. They're going to tell you that they don't need something, that when you bring that food, they're going to be like, oh my God, thank you so much. I was wondering how I was going to feed my family, because they're not really, some people aren't even thinking about food until you bring it, right? Like until you bring it. And then it's like, oh yeah, I am hungry, because you have to think about those. Jesus always thought about the physical need, right? Before you can get to the spiritual, you got to take care of the physical. So think about those needs: food, drink, maybe find out if it's somebody that you're close to, their favorite candy bar, their favorite, maybe some music, send them something, an inspiration. You don't always, because some people don't know what to say. So send them a text, with just a quote, inspirational quote, right? Like something. You don't ask because they're gonna tell you nothing. Okay, so so I don't know.
I'm waving my hand at that. I'm waving my hand at that because I was like, yeah, I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good. Jerome, what about you?
Yeah, or
Sorry.
even if you don't want to be a burden. Sometimes you know you're not good, but you don't even want to be a burden. You know,
Right.
it seems like you're asking for too much either. So and whether you want to say it's ego or stubborn or whatever, sometimes you just don't want to be a burden.
I think it's just innate within
Yeah.
us, right? To not want to put something on somebody else,
Right.
right? So that's why I just been telling people, give them a gift card. If you don't know what they like to eat, give them a Vanilla Sky gift card for $50 and say, hey, this is for you to go out to dinner on me. Right? Like if you don't know what it is, if you got, your caterer friends, get them to cater them a meal for 2 or 3 days. Right? And just do it. And for God's sake, do it beyond the week of their loss, right? Because everybody's thinking about them at that point. So think about if you don't get yours in that first week, then you put it on your calendar for the next month, because guess what? Every month is a new challenge for somebody that's grieving. And especially when you're talking about pregnancy loss and you know what that due date is in November, then you plan for yourself to do something in November, because we have to get to the point where we're supporting people throughout the year, right? Not through the week, not on the onset, because quite honestly, it's not going to hit them until about week 3, after the ceremony, after the repast, after all of that, because they're in work mode. They are in the I gotta get stuff done mode. And so it really sometimes doesn't hit a person until the service or a day or week after the service, because they're too busy trying to do the work of loss. That's what I call it, the work of loss.
So, or when some reminds them, some people just remind them of a moment. And I'm sorry, okay, but at one point before you get too far from this, when people are ready, if you ask them, and you're thankful for that. But to your point, those that go the extra mile, like you don't even gotta ask, and they just show up with something. I remember when I was dealing with COVID, and it was it was tough. It was tough, and I just remember my coworkers like, "You need anything?" I'm like, no, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to deal with nobody. Then one day I heard the doorbell, and then I looked at my phone. It was like, hey, somebody just delivered some food for you. And I was like, oh, crap, thanks. So those that do would, even without asking, they just pay attention to your point. That's needed.
It's needed. I mean, when we lost our daughter, Anaya, somebody from my husband's job, they bought like platters of food. I mean, we weren't thinking about no food, but my God, that night later on, we were like, thank you, Jesus. Like, even with suggestion is if you're really close, right? Like people came, my mother and my aunt, they came, they washed clothes, right? Like they were doing the laundry, they came, they cleaned the house, they came and they they made sure the boys were good, so just coming and doing that, is a load off of a family. And, you may not be able to do it for everybody, but for those people that you feel the most comfortable, and it takes boldness sometimes to just show up and do something, because guess what? They appreciate it. And so I think what Tamika asked also is it does take a level of boldness to go seek help. Okay, it takes boldness. Like you gotta, all right, I'm doing this thing. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get some help, right? Like you gotta make the phone call. Like, so I'm speaking from experience, because like when I lost my mom, it was horrible, right? I know this is not reproductive health, but we're talking about grief and loss, but it took a level of boldness to actually call the therapist and make the appointment. And then it takes another level of bravery to show up at the appointment, because, you want to cancel. It's like, I don't want to deal with it. It's too much. I don't know, and so it does take some level of boldness and bravery to make the appointment, to make yourself vulnerable, because it's such a vulnerability to speak to anybody about what you're feeling about anything. So, just be brave, and just make that call and show up. Don't cancel. So if you was thinking about canceling an appointment tomorrow, don't cancel.
I love that. I love that. That would probably be me. Can we reschedule this? So I will ask you this. What are we've talked about a good bit, right? From how do we show up, be bold and seek out the help, get the help and show up when the help is there. But also supporting those who are going through just by showing up for them, right? And then you also got onto the support system, right? That was going to be one of my questions as well, is what role do our support systems play and our communities play? And so I'm glad that was a part of the conversation as well. But here's another thing I wanted to ask is some misconceptions about people. Like we kind of tapped onto it a little bit of, I'm okay, you're not okay. You're really not okay, right? And Carlika says, don't cancel the appointment. Absolutely. But let's talk about some misconceptions that a lot of people think, or have thought about, or maybe just not even realize that it's, I guess, a myth or a misconception when you're grieving after a miscarriage or stillborn. And I would even say the inability to conceive, because that's still a level of grief of trying every single month and it's just not happening. And, I'm waving my hand at that too. But can we talk about that with some common misconceptions, and how can we either challenge them or change them, or give some advice on how can we help others as they go through them?
Ooh, that's a loaded.
I know.
Okay. So when we talk about misconceptions, right? Now, are you talking about the misconceptions that a person who had? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Sheila. You're strong. Okay. So when we're talking about misconceptions and miscommunications, a lot of times now I know Gerard talked about the spiritual side, and the thing is, pray about it. God gonna give you double for your trouble and your shame. But it sounds good, right? It sounds really good. God's gonna give you double for your shame, but that's not what that scripture always means. And it doesn't mean that it's gonna be double of what you lost, right? Doesn't mean that because you lost a child, you're gonna all of a sudden have twins next, right? Doesn't mean that if you lose $200 that God's gonna give you 400. It doesn't mean that, right? Or some of the other things is people have actually told people not to feel bad. God won't give you more than you can bear. Who needs to hear that, right? Or just go on out here and have another baby. That one blows me, because do you know how long it took me to get this one?
Right.
It's not as easy. And so the misconception is that it's easy for people to become pregnant. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. That's why 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss of some sort, right? It's not that easy, right? But we take for granted, because that's what we learned in high school. Boy meets girl, they get together, baby made, right? There's no mention of a struggle, right? Another one is keep busy. If I just keep myself busy, I won't have time. But here's the problem with that misconception is when you're not silent. I always say this: silence is loud, baby. Silence is loud. Okay. Yeah. Silence is extremely loud. And that's why when we keeping busy makes you not think about, it's an avoidance, right? It's what we call in mental health is avoidance. You are trying to avoid it. And so if I avoid it, I won't feel it. If I avoid it, I won't think about it. If I avoid it, it'll somehow go away. But baby, it's not. It's gonna be right there. And it's gonna be just like I always say, like Florida Evans, when she kept trying to be busy. And I know we use it as a meme and we try to laugh, but that is so real. She tried to keep busy, and then bam.
Yeah.
Breaking something, you hurting somebody, you know. And the last one is it's just going to take time, right? And again, time is not a healer, right? It's what we're doing with the time. It's the confronting of the thing I'm trying to avoid. Even in prayer, you got to come clean with God. You got to face it. You can, God, you know my heart. No, you got to even confess. God, I feel this thing. This hurts, right? Like you got to be naked, like T.D. Jakes' book many, many years ago, Naked and Not Ashamed. Like you got to get like that, right? That's when the healing takes place. It's not going to take place by pretending that it never happened.
Yeah.
Pretending that, oh, I can just go out here. Trust me, I've done that. In our reproductive, when we were struggling to have a baby, I remember I was upset. Okay, my husband was like, at first it was all good. Come on, let's do this. I'm ovulating, let's go. Right? And it was good for him for a while. He was all in. But then after a while, it wasn't fun. It was obsessive, unhealthy.
Right.
And so we gotta confront it. We gotta be real with the healing, right? We gotta be real with how we're feeling, because guess what? You're talking about your support system. How can they support you if you lying to them?
Right.
It's only so much discernment they're gonna have before they be like, oh, you okay? And they really start to believe it because you wearing a mask and you're doing so well that they actually start to believe it. And then you're gonna be mad because then you're gonna be like, they don't care about me, nobody cares about me. No, they doing what you told them. You told them that you was okay. So
right.
you gotta, those are some of the misconceptions.
I love that. And the fact that, Gerard, did you have anything to say to that before I get to this point here?
Yeah, I could just add a few. One, just amplify the one about the time, and just speaking from a spiritual side. I remember a theologian. He said that time doesn't heal. Time reveals the hand of God healing you. So when you sit back and, of course, you're doing the work as well. I thought that was one of the most profound things I learned, just dealing with it afterwards. But another one is that in our culture, we got, for the most part, our life is good. So there's this idea that even if it's not spoken, but it's the idea that we shouldn't suffer. And I think not that we're out looking to suffer, but I think when we realize that in the greater scheme of things that we will suffer, we will have loss, we will have disappointment, we will have just a number of things that we're gonna, there's people stricken with cancers and death and all kind of things, and not okaying that thing. But I think if we understand like this, sometimes that's a part of life. You didn't trying to say it right, because again, I'm not trying to okay anything bad happening to us, but just from a spiritual sense, we know that we will suffer for Christ's sake, and it's a part of it. Now, understanding what that looks like and how to get through that, because we, there is that part of it as well. I think for me, it's understanding like it don't keep me in this woe is me mindset when bad does happen, and it pushes me towards trying to, heal and get through it. And then the other one is this false positivity, where you always trying to find the silver lining in every cloud. And I think there's some good in that, so that you don't just sit in the bad all the time. But what you just said is that you got to own that and be open and forthcoming with God, letting him know like what it is that you're feeling and that you're dealing with. And that false positivity, I just think that it doesn't, that it could be more damaging than good if you're not careful about managing that.
Yeah, that's true. Can I add one more, Tamika? I thought about while Gerard was speaking, and this one was someone is worse off than you. I don't think comparison game, right? This is like Okay, let me see who's suffering more, or let me see who's hurting more. Your loss is more than my loss. Like that's just things that I've heard recently. You
Yeah.
know, oh, if somebody, somewhere is worse off than you, is worse. Well, I'm sorry that they are worse off than me, but right now I'm having a selfish moment here, and I am feeling what I'm feeling, and I need to work through that. And I think also, I like that Sheila. She said there are lessons in the valley, and you can grow in the bad times. Definitely, definitely. And I think that we have to balance things, right? Jesus had real emotions. He wept. Okay, that means he felt it. That means a wept is different than a tear falling from the eye. Like he was really hurt about Lazarus, right? So to be like Jesus didn't have no emotions whatsoever is just not even
Right.
biblical, right? Like it's not biblical, right? So I don't think that we need to wear an S on our chest and I believe God, so I'm just gonna ram through the wall. No, and act like nothing's wrong. I think that that's not even what God is asking. But when those things, when you find yourself in a mental space where you no longer have control, is when you need the professional help, because quite honestly, a friend, it can help, but you need somebody who's going to be able, who's been trained and equipped to help you through those like really, really dark times. And I think that we have to manage that, because for so many years as a Christian body, we have told people to just pray and go see their pastor, who may or may not be equipped to really handle a manic depressive person, or somebody who's dealing with, you're just looking at this one part of grief, but they really have some other depressive issues. So you got to be careful of, just that's why I'm saying with the time, I'm looking at it through a different lens. Right. So that's all I'm saying. It's just, that's why you have to be able to speak, and it helps when you have, like you said, your support group, your support system helping you to be like, oh no, baby, you need to go talk to somebody. You're going like down. Right.
I
And
like that.
you need some more support, more than what I'm capable of doing. Right. And as a support system, you have to know when you've reached your moment, right? So you got to realize when the flag on the play. We're not waiting for the person to say, hey, look, I don't want to be here no more. We're not waiting for that sentence. We're waiting. We if you're really in the inner circle of a person and you really see them going into a dark space, you have to be like, it's time for us to have a hard conversation, right? Like we need to bring in someone else. Like we need to bring in someone to help us out with
I
this.
love that. I like that. And, speaking of bringing in someone to help, right? I want us to talk about, how do we break the silence to bring those people in? How do we break the silence around reproductive health challenges? So we're going to do right here, we're going to do rapid fire. Okay. We're going to do rapid fire. And I'm going to ask, I think is what, 2 questions each I'm going to ask. And you got 60 seconds to tell me what is your advice in this situation, right? Or answer the question. I'll just say that. So the first question for both of you is, why, okay, I'll say in the Black community, because again, this is for Black women, and I'm raising my hand to this because I was a part of this problem of being silent and not speaking up, not seeking out the help, because I didn't know the help existed. And when I did seek out the help, there was no help. So I didn't know when the help came along. It just wasn't there when I was looking for it. Okay. So along with growing up in a black home, we're told, don't tell people all your business. Keep your business in the house. Everybody needs to know what's going on in your business, right? So why do we think that there's so much silence in the Black community when it comes to our reproductive health issues? So I have a lot that I can say, but I'm not gonna. I don't want to, give y'all that preempt. But Gerard, for you, why do you think that there is so much silence when it comes to reproductive health in the Black community?
Yeah, good question. I think part of it is because we are gauged, our value is gauged on the ability to have a family. Whether you're in a relationship, if you have kids, what your kids are doing, how healthy are they, those kind of things. So when you don't measure up, when you feel like you don't measure up, you just kind of, just remain silent, don't deal with it. And let's be honest, this world will shame you, and not to get too political, but what's going on right now in politics, where they criticize the childless cat, childless cat lady. So and then tell them that, hey, your voice or the importance of what you're dealing with is less than someone who actually has kids, right? So those kind of things can be used to shame you, and if you're not measuring up to what society has deemed as appropriate, is when it comes to having a family of kids, it can make you shame and keep you quiet.
Right. I love that. The childless cat lady. I wish somebody would. Okay. Sunita. Sunita, what are your thoughts on the silence around reproductive health?
I think one of the number one reasons why so such a stigma is there is a lack of trust in our medical system with Black people. Okay, so historically with medical system, right? Black people just don't trust the medical system that well. I mean, it has been proven. Reasons on why. Am I going to leave the hospital alive? Or are they going to take my body parts and do something? Are they going to inject me with something that's not real? Right? So sometimes I'm going to keep it to myself and just, do some home remedy stuff, or go into what we call the roots, and, going into more of doulas, and I love me a good doula, and all of that, spiritual care. So I wrote down in the Black community, since we've been talking, it's been about faith, right? So I don't speak out, because if I speak out that I'm suffering or I'm upset, then I might be seen as someone who lacks faith. And I don't want to be seen as somebody who's lacking faith, because I'm going over here to Shady Grove Fertility to help me, instead of just trusting God to help me get pregnant. So if I start speaking on taking medicines or trying Comed or trying this, that I may be seen as a person who lacks faith. Right. And so there is also that fear of retribution, that, hey, I need to take this person off my ministerial staff. I need to take this person out of, my intercessory group, because they don't have the faith. They going over here to the man-made directives to help them with their problem. And so I think that is a barrier that we have to say it's okay to pray and seek a therapist, right? It's okay to pray and go see a fertility doctor. It's okay to pray and still, see people, professional people, that's going to help you with whatever goal it is. Pray that my marriage is going to make it, right? So, and if my marriage don't, then did I lack faith? Was it not for me? Did I do something that made God mad and he took this away? So we have that is how we do it. So how do we break it? We talk. We go against it, because the more people hear it, the more it becomes the norm. When it's silent, it makes it seem abnormal. But when the more you hear it, the more it becomes normal to hear. We got to normalize it.
Got it. Awesome. All right, Gerard, you ready? Mm-hmm. The question for you is, what advice do you have for men who feel isolated while supporting their partners?
Yeah, one thing I learned in the military is how invaluable it is to be prepared. So you build up for it. In our community, we're so reactive to everything. And of course, you can't prepare for everything that's going to happen. But building a support system, having a therapist or a counselor on speed dial, just some things like that that you can have to prepare yourself for when things come about, can help you when the trouble do come. So that's one of the pieces of advice. But the other one is also know your limitations. One of the worst things we can do is become brain surgeons, in these issues that we're not qualified to handle. We talked about earlier about leaning on the support from experts. Know your limitations. And you can do a whole lot more harm than help, if you start dabbling in and getting into spaces that you're not qualified in. So reach out to the experts, and don't let shame and guilt keep you from doing that.
Awesome. I love that. Don't let guilt stop you from getting the healing that you need, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Sunita, here's our last question for you. And I will say this relates to me a lot, because when you're trying so hard to do the thing that you're trying to do, okay, trying to start a family, as you spoke earlier about Tony and how he was just like, okay, this is a lot. Okay. It becomes too much. It can almost drive a wedge, between couples, because the woman is still ready to go for it, or the woman is just like, okay, pump the brakes, but the man is just like, okay, let's try again, without, we're not recognizing each other's emotions. We're not recognizing each other's moment where we just need to take a beat and breathe. Right. But how can we as a community, as a Black community, because again, this is a big issue for African-American women when it comes to reproductive health. It's a big issue when it comes to women in general with our reproductive health, right? So how can we as a community support the couple, not just the man and the woman, but how can we support the whole couple through their grief and loss in a way that encourages healing?
Ooh. I think the way that as a community is to give space to that couple, right? Don't pressure them to, return to their normal routine too fast. Like they may need a little break when they do come back to church. Don't bombard them, right? Don't put them on the spot, so the way we support them it is a healthy balance, right? You want to check in and let them know, but do we need to do it every single week? Every time you see them, you saw them Sunday, you said something, and then Wednesday you see them at a Bible study, you said something. Like, you don't have to do that, you know what I mean? But I think the way we do that is we also, as a community, do things like what you're doing now. We provide a space where they may not feel ready to speak, but they will place themselves into the safe environment where you're not like Gerard and his family, don't do that when they show up. You know what I mean? So I think that that's key, is that when they show up, that you're not putting them on the spot, but that you are providing the sources for them to take. And just like Carlika said, like, don't start asking them about when the next time. What are you trying? What y'all doing now? Are you trying again? Get back in the, like, watch what you think is positive words. Is, like I said one time, it can be like a knife, because you don't know what they're dealing with. And as someone who has struggled with fertility too, not to the extent that Tamika, the worst thing that hurt me the most was when people kept saying, so are y'all trying again? What you doing? That was like a knife in my heart, because they didn't know that behind the scenes I was suffering. They didn't know behind the scenes I had already miscarried again. So when you ask a person something that you just deem is just so good, just watch what you saying. If that's something useful, ask yourself the question. Say it out loud to yourself. and utilize empathy and say, "Would I want somebody to say that to me?" Right? Think about your most extreme loss and then say, "Would I want to hear that?" You
Yeah,
know
'cause
what I
some of these,
mean? Yeah.
I'm
So
just saying, because some of these words can get a response that you don't want, right? And it
that you
can
want
cause a
to hear.
divide in your friendship. Okay, it causes a divide within the whole family. If you ask somebody something and they're really in it, and you know they're still, their emotions are still high because they're still trying to understand what just happened and how they're going to move forward, and what does my life look like now? Do we try again? Do we start over? Like all the things. I know for me, it took everything in my head not to snap when people would ask me a question. And it was really because I hadn't opened up. I hadn't said anything to anybody. I hadn't talked about it to anybody except for the doctors and Dion. So those are the only people that knew really what I was going through on a monthly basis. And so for me, it's just like, don't ask me, do I want kids? Like, just mind your business.
And if I could add one more thing, we just talked about this because we just had someone just really had this. This is like really fresh conversation. Is every time they cry, it may not necessarily be about the loss of their baby. Like it could be, you know, tears have a way of cleansing, but it also could be like when Gerard was saying, we're praying about something and you believe in God and you just believe in God so much that you might be in a church service and or you're somewhere and you really God is speaking to you or what have you, and you have an emotional response. I've had people come up to me and be like, "It's okay. The Lord is God." Like so far off of what I was really thinking about in that moment. Right? So every time someone cries, you see them crying. It don't assume that it's what you think it might be, because that may not be the only thing. It may be a spiritual response. It may be, you know, they're feeling really good, or it could be something else. You know what I mean? Like, so don't always assume that you know why a person may be crying.
I love it. I love it. Gerard, you have anything you want to follow up before we wrap up?
That's it. Dead on. I
Awesome.
appreciate the
Awesome.
wisdom.
So we are wrapping up, you all, but you know, here at the bottom of the screen, you'll see, tell us, you know, what is one thing that you can take away from tonight's conversation? What is one thing that you can do for someone that may be in your community that may be experiencing loss, or may be experiencing trying to start a family, or just maybe going through some stuff and you may have gotten a whiff about it. You're not sure on all of the details because really and truly ain't all of our business. However, if you are able to offer them any kind of help or solace, you know, let us know that. What is one thing that what is one action you'll take tonight after this conversation? And I'll just share a little bit before, as we're wrapping up, we got about 1 minute. I remember when I began speaking, I remember when I began telling people about my journey, and they were, wow, we didn't know that you were going through this. And the crazy part about it is I started talking about my personal deep dark secret journey at a Toastmasters meeting, y'all, like in front of everybody. I'm just like, listen, if I'm gonna start talking about, I'm just gonna let it all out, because I'm tired of holding it in, and I'm tired of crying by myself. I'm tired of going in the bathroom at work and crying every time I get the call to say it didn't happen, right? And so I started talking about it at my Toastmasters meeting. Now I cried through a number of them. I cried, and they, you know, it's okay, Tamika. You know, we'll cry with you. You know, if you need to vent, like, come and talk to me. And they were very, very supportive. And I was just like, wow, there really are people who care enough to say, hey, I'm here if you need me. And that just made me feel so much better, to the point like every speech that I gave was about another part of my journey. And I laughed about a lot of it, you know, because I love to inject humor into whatever it is that I'm doing. Now, I don't want everybody to feel sad, because I ain't sad no more, right? We're going to do this thing and we're going to make it happen one way or the other. It's going to happen, right? But I just remember that. So I just want to encourage anyone who's listening. I want to encourage anyone who you may have someone in your family who may be experiencing reproductive health issues and challenges. I encourage you just to let them talk when they're ready to talk. Don't try to force them to talk. Don't try to make them, you know, give you an answer to this or that. And as Carlika and Dr. Sheila Sapp have said in the comments, don't ask them when are they trying, you know, when are they going to have children, and don't ask them why they don't have any kids, because that could cause a physical altercation. Okay. I mean, it could. But I want to encourage all of you just to be there, be a community, be a support, and just listen to them when they're ready to talk. Send them a gift card, cook them a meal, right? If you know that they've experienced loss in any kind, and just be a good person to them as you would want someone to be to you in your life. And so, again, thank you all for tuning in to the Reproductive Health for Black Women Fireside Chat. Thank you, Sunita Mitchell. Thank you, Gerard Ware, for being a part of the conversation tonight. This has been absolutely one eye-opening for me, just on the man's point of view, as a man who has gone through the process, with your wife. But so I thank you for sharing that. I thank you for opening up and being transparent. I know that it's going to bless so many others that will have the opportunity to say, you know what, I can talk about it. So I'm willing to reach out and get the help that I need. So, in true spirit of reaching out and getting the help you need, let's talk about how can people find you, connect with you, and stay connected with you. Sunita, let us know how can people find you and connect.
Okay. Right now, I've relocated into Georgia, so everything is getting reconnected. But yep, I'm in Georgia. It's pouring down, raining from the hurricane. I was so glad that the internet stayed. You can find me on joybreakforth.com. That's my website. So you'll see everything about me, the programs, and everything that I do there.
Awesome. All right. And Gerard, how can people find you and connect with you?
If you need to find me, reach out to Tamika, my flip.
Right. Reach out to Tamika.
Oh man, so hey, I'm on social media platforms. It's Gerard Ware. Also, you can go to my website, Moshe, MOSHE, MosheInc.org. And we're there doing work in the community. We love to connect with people that's out there looking to find ways to serve the community. And the Floor is Yours podcast. We're coming up on our 5th year in business. So we got some things coming out to celebrate that, that milestone. But I would love to connect. And I just want to say one thing before I go. Get help. Sunita and people like her out there just dedicating their lives to figure out how to help people. But it means nothing if people are not reaching out. So I would say just, it's not hard. I mean, it's not easy. I get it. You got to get out your comfort zone. But from someone who's done it, I can tell you it's well worth it. I go to therapy regularly, and I talk to my therapist. I joke with her, and I tell her, like, if I hit the lotto, I'm gonna have a long conversation with you. So it's not about just grieving; it's about celebrating and just talking through it. So therapy is a good thing. Whether it's somebody professional, someone in a religious organization, a good friend, just make sure it's someone that's qualified to give you some good advice. So I believe in therapy. So please, get the help if you need it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you all. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's conversation from last week and today. And be on the lookout for more impactful conversations. I think we're going to do this on a monthly basis because, again, reproductive health is 365, 24/7. So be on the lookout for more conversations that we're hosting. EnergizeHer conversations, EnergizeHer fireside chats, bringing together amazing people to having amazing, phenomenal conversations. Again, you could be on here next time. Everybody has a story. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I'm Tamika Chapman. You all having a great evening. All right.
Peace, people.
It's a blessing, not a curse. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget. If you need reminders, then run this back. You're so pretty for a black girl. It's not a compliment. Don't whitewash who you ought to be an option. You don't sound white. You just finished up your